Peter Allen Laird, born January 27, 1954, is an American comic book writer and artist best known for co-creating the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles with writer and artist Kevin Eastman. Laird was born and raised in North Adams, Massachusetts. Toward the end of 1983, Laird was earning just $10 an illustration from a local newspaper in Dover, New Hampshire. He was also doing illustrations for fanzines like The Oracle. Very soon his fortunes and pop culture would change forever. Kevin Brooks Eastman, born May 30, 1962, is an American comic book artist and writer best known for co-creating Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles with Peter Laird. Eastman is also the editor and publisher of the magazine Heavy Metal. Eastman was born in Portland, Maine. He attended Westbrook High School in Westbrook, Maine, with comic book illustrator Steve Lavigne. He grew up a comic book fan, with Jack Kirby as his idol and K-Mandy as his favorite title of his. In 1983 he worked in a restaurant while he searched for publishers for his comics. He met a waitress who was attending the University of Massachusetts Amherst and followed her to Northampton, Massachusetts. While searching for a local underground newspaper to publish his work, he began a professional relationship with Peter Laird, who worked at nearby Dover, New Hampshire, and the two collaborated for a short time on various comics projects. In May 1984, Eastman and Laird self-published the first black & white issue of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. The 40-page oversized comic had an initial print run of 3,275 copies and was largely funded by a $1,000 loan from Eastman's uncle Quentin. It was published by the duo's Mirage Studios, a name chosen because, as Eastman says, there wasn't an actual studio, only kitchen tables and couches with lapboards. By September 1985, their first issue had received 3 additional printings. In May 1984, Laird and Kevin Eastman self-published the first black & white issue of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, at an initial print run of 3,000 copies for the 40-page oversized comic. It was largely funded by a loan from Eastman's uncle, Quentin, the experience of which had a profound impact on Laird, and led indirectly to his later work with the Xeric Foundation, and published by the duo's Mirage Studios, a name chosen because there wasn't an actual studio, only kitchen tables and couches with lapboards. That first issue received a number of subsequent printings over the next few years, as the Turtles phenomenon began to take off. Laird's newspaper experience led to the duo creating a 4-page press kit that, according to Flaming Carrot creator Bob Burden's own Mystery Men press kit, included a story outline and artwork that they sent to 180 TV and radio stations, as well as both the Associated Press and United Press International. This led to widespread press coverage of both the TMNT property and Mirage Studios itself, creating a demand for the interestingly titled comic that caught everyone by surprise. With the solicitation of their second issue, Eastman and Laird's Turtles comic began a meteoric rise to success, bringing in advance orders of 15,000 copies. This, Eastman has been quoted as saying, basically ended up with us clearing a profit of $2,000 apiece, which allowed us to write and draw stories full-time. It was enough to pay the rent, pay the bills, and buy enough macaroni and cheese and pencils to live on. The Turtles phenomenon saw the duo invited to their first comics convention at the 10th Annual Atlanta Fantasy Fair in 1984, where they mingled with the likes of Larry Niven, Forrest J. Ackerman and Fred Hembeck among others. With their November 1985 fifth issue, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles downsized to the more common American comics format and size, and the previous 4 issues were also reprinted in this size and format with new color covers. Also in '85, Solson Publications released How to Draw Eastman and Laird's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Solson would follow this up with the 6-issue Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Authorized Martial Arts Training Manual, as well as 1 issue of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Teach Karate Volume in 1987. Laird's newspaper experience led to the two creating a 4-page press kit, which included a story outline and artwork. They sent the press kit to 180 television and radio stations as well as to the Associated Press and United Press International. This led to widespread press coverage of both the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Mirage Studios itself, creating a demand for the comic. With their second issue, Eastman and Laird's Turtles comic began a quick rise to success, bringing in advance orders of 15,000 copies, 5 times the initial print run of the first issue. This earned Eastman and Laird a profit of $2,000 each and allowed them to become full-time comic book creators. The Turtles phenomenon saw the duo invited to their first comics convention at the 10th Annual Atlanta Fantasy Fair in 1984, where they mingled with notable comic creators like Larry Niven, Forrest J. Ackerman and Fred Hembeck. Their 5th issue of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was released in November 1985, and was downsized to the more common American comics format and size. The previous 4 issues were also reprinted in this size and format with new colored covers. Also in 1985, Solson Publications released How to Draw Eastman and Laird's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Solson would follow this up with the 6-issue Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Authorized Martial Arts Training Manual, as well as 1 issue of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Teach Karate Volume in 1987. Mirage's Turtles comic led to a widening media presence for the heroes. Eastman and Laird began to widely merchandise their property. Dark Horse Miniatures produced a set of 15 lead figurines for role-playing gamers and collectors. Palladium Books produced a role-playing game featuring the Turtles, and First Comics reprinted in 4 volumes the first 11 issues as color trade paperback collections. Palladium's role-playing game brought the Turtles to the attention of licensing agent Mark Friedman, and the Turtles phenomenon took off, with the various characters soon appearing on t-shirts, Halloween masks, mugs, and other paraphernalia. A 5-part televised cartoon miniseries based on the Turtles debuted in December 1987. The half-hour episodes were produced by Osamu Yoshioka and the animation was directed by Yoshikatsu Kosai from scripts by David Wise and Patty Howarth. The miniseries was successful, leading to a full series, with the miniseries forming the first season. The series had a 9-year, 10-season, 193-episode run. Bob Burden writes, "Within days of it airing, it was apparent that the TMNT would prove every bit as popular for the television audience as it had been for the comic readers. From there, Surge Licensing formed an unstoppable creative marketing powerhouse that set a new standard of excellence in the licensing and merchandising industries." In January 1988, Eastman and Laird visited Playmates Toys, who wished to market action figures based on the comic book and animated cartoon series, further cementing the Turtles' place in history and making Eastman and Laird extremely successful. Multiple other Turtles comics, toys, books, games, and other merchandising items have subsequently appeared, overseen and sometimes fully created by Eastman and Laird. Among these are 5 live-action films: Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in 1990, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2, The Secret of the Ooze in 1991, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3 in 1993, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in 2014, and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Out of the Shadows in 2016, with Eastman making a brief cameo in the latter. 4 more television series were also created. Ninja Turtles: The Next Mutation in 1997, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles from 2003, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in 2012, in which Eastman wrote the 5th season episode Lone Rat and Cubs, and Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. There was also an animated feature film, TMNT, in 2007. Creative differences began to strain Eastman and Laird's partnership. In an interview in 2002, Laird noted that the two hadn't spent much time together since '93. Eastman moved to California while Laird stayed in Massachusetts. On June 1, 2000, Laird and the Mirage Group purchased Eastman's ownership in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles property and corporations. Eastman wanted to move on to other projects. The buyout was completed on March 1, 2008. In 2011, Eastman began working with the TMNT series again as a writer and artist on the IDW comic series, as well as an advisor on the 2014 reboot of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles film series. Eastman is said to have a cameo in the film as a doctor, and has voiced the character Ice Cream Kitty in the 2012 CGI series. In December 2019, issue 100 of IDW Publishing's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles comic series featured a teaser ad for an upcoming comic project titled The Last Ronin, in which the prospect of a possible reunion and cooperation between Eastman and Laird was held out. The project was confirmed in April 2020, with a release date sometime in the summer. That the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles became such a success and in such a short space of time came as a surprise to both Eastman and Laird. Laird has stated on several occasions that, in Laird's own words, starting the Turtles was a goof. It was not anything we envisioned directing our lives in any way, shape, or form. It was like, hey, this looks like fun. Let's self-publish it. Let's see what happens. Suddenly, and just completely out of the blue, this Turtles phenomenon emerged, and really from day one just took over. It was a rapidly accelerating process which culminated in essentially taking over our lives completely. End quote. Laird says that this led to increased pressures on the two creators and the team which they formed to help them, including a prolonged period about a year of artists' block in Laird. The incredible growth and complexity of the business that sprang up around their instantly successful Turtles properties led to Laird suddenly discovering to his horror that he no longer enjoyed drawing. It was a real shock to him, because if he ever had anything that he could rely on, it was that he loved to draw. Laird and Eastman's creations went on to become a popular cultural phenomenon, forcing both of them to take regular sabbaticals from the comic to deal with the day-to-day pressures of running what had become a multimedia franchise. Eastman sold his share of the franchise, with the exception of a small continuing income participation, to Laird and the Mirage Group on June 1, 2000. On March 1, 2008, Laird and Mirage bought out Eastman's remaining rights and interest, and the two went their separate ways. Concerning Eastman's departure, Laird stated his belief that Eastman was just tired of it. On October 19, 2009, Laird sold the franchise to Viacom, the parent company of Nickelodeon, but still retains the rights to create and publish up to 18 black and white comics based on the franchise per year. Although ostensibly overseeing the animated Turtles projects through Mirage, Laird had minimal hands-on involvement in the development of the original animated series, and even less with the Next Mutation series. One of the unique products of this series, female turtle Venus, is notorious for becoming one of the additions to the franchise that Laird most despises. However, he took a more active role in the next TMNT animated venture, acting as a consultant, and working with the guy I consider the head writer, Lloyd Goldfine. In this role, he says, from the get-go I've been looking at everything, from day one. Story premises, outlines, the full scripts and the sketching and designing of characters and settings. I've been doing a little drawing myself. Lots of suggestions. I've seen a few of the episodes, and it's neat to see a lot of the stuff I've worked on. While final preparations were underway, he relaunched the official comics canon of the franchise with Volume 4, the third published by Mirage Studios, with artwork supplied by fellow TMNT writer, friend, and Rat King creator Jim Lawson. When the new series proved a success, Laird relaunched Tales of the TMNT to accompany the fourth volume. Following a successful deal to revive the Turtles theatrically, Laird put Volume 4 on hold to develop the new film, leaving several plot lines unresolved. Tales of the TMNT was thought to go on hiatus in 2008, and the franchise's future beyond its on-screen presence was uncertain, but staff confirmed that this was not the case. It was confirmed on Steve Murphy's blog that Peter Laird was intending to return to Volume 4 and that the title would return, distributed digitally by Mirage. While co-managing Mirage Studios, Eastman and Laird often spoke of the difficulties in maintaining creative control of their work. Eastman decided to address this problem by using his own personal knowledge and connections to help other creators. Approaching Laird with his ideas, Eastman was met with a less than positive response. To quote Kevin Eastman in his own words, "My first thought was to expand the publishing arm of Mirage. But the more sane of the two partners said, 'What are you, nuts?' We were working pretty much full-time just on the Turtles." Pete told me, and I agreed, that he didn't want to have anything else on his brain in terms of publishing at the time. So with his blessing, I started. Eastman founded Tundra Publishing in 1990 to realize personal and other projects. He joined with other comic creators like Scott McCloud and Dave Sim to form the Creators Bill of Rights. Eastman felt obligated to expand it beyond theory and into practice, providing a forum for comics creators to work for a publisher while maintaining ownership of their work. Rick Veitch has written that, One of the plans was for Tundra to act as an exoskeleton for an existing self-publisher, offering marketing muscle, higher production values, printing costs paid and a page rate up front for half the action, no strings attached. Moreover, Eastman provided a forum for Marvel and DC creators to work on projects that they could not otherwise realize. To quote Eastman, "Basically, I'd meet them at conventions and they'd said they're stuck doing Spider-Man, they had a wife and a kid at home, and they had to make ends meet. But if they really had a chance, they said they'd really do this at Tundra, and I'd hear this repeatedly. So, I went back to those artists because I had the money and said I'd give them the chance. I asked them what they'd like to do. They could pick their dream projects that they'd wanna do and I would provide the funding so that they could survive and they didn't have to do Spider-Man for a year, and I'll fund the projects, and I just wanted to make my money back from the profits to keep my company going." End quote. Projects partly realized by Tundra included Alan Moore and Bill Sienkiewicz's Big Numbers, Moore & Eddie Campbell's From Hell, Moore & Melinda Jeddy's Lost Girls. These last two original serialized in Stephen R. Bissett's Taboo anthology, which was also part published by Tundra, The Crow, Mike Allward's Madman and Dave McKean's Cages, and others. Eastman initially thought that his experience at Mirage gave him a pretty good grasp of what a publisher should be, and what a publisher needs to do, although he swiftly realized that Tundra was not like publishing the Turtles. As part of Eastman's designs for Tundra were to produce personal projects of a more adult nature than the Turtles-oriented Mirage was geared towards. This saw Tundra fitting in the dubious middle ground, as their intended product sat somewhat awkwardly between the comic shop and the book shop. Eastman says that he thought that the audience was a lot larger than it actually was, citing his personal assumption that readers would grow up through X-Men and discover the Sandman and then Dark Knight and Watchmen and beyond. The relatively new inroads of comics and graphic novels into bookshops worked against Tundra at the time. Eastman swiftly became aware that Tundra and the Turtles differed considerably, not least since the latter was successful enough to effectively run itself, with a few nudges, to keep it moving along. Tundra, on the other hand, dealt in new properties, which required building from the ground up, and was a lot more work than Eastman had anticipated, growing far too quickly for comfort, and requiring considerable injections of time and money, rather than being profitable. Speaking in 1992 and 1993, Eastman was optimistic that the company had, quote Eastman, finally reached the point where it had slowed up enough to be giving individual projects the time and attention they required. Shortly thereafter, Tundra was bought out by Kitchen's Ink Press, closing its doors after just 3 years, losing Eastman between $9 and $14 million. Despite heavy financial losses, Eastman remains philosophical about his work with Tundra, drawing the analogy that, to quote Eastman, "Doing the Turtles was like going to college and doing Tundra publishing was like getting my master's degree. So I learned a lot with the Turtles and I learned the rest of what I needed to know when I did Tundra." End quote. He makes mention of the multiple award nominations Tundra received during its first and second years, including Harvey Awards and Eisner Awards, but notes that despite critical acclaim, the company was not making money on its titles, and had to cease production. He notes that Tundra was one of the earlier creator-owned companies, before Image really took off, and before Dark Horse Comics' Legends line. Eastman admits that Tundra tried to do too much too quickly, and ran into difficulties accordingly. He also suggests that, quote, "Not one book made any money." He also believes that part of Tundra's downfall was tied to his offering Marvel and DC employees the chance to work on creator-owned and personal projects. He has stated in interviews that, "In my personal opinion, we took away so many creams of the crops artists like Dave McKean, Neil Gaiman, Alan Moore, Rick Veitch, Mike Allward that the two big companies had the power to go to the key distributors and made them short sell ownership and bury these guys, because now that Dave McKean is doing stuff at Tundra, the big publishers were losing money because Dave's not doing Arkham Asylum 2 and Alan Moore's not doing Watchmen 2. He's not doing Swamp Thing, but instead he's doing From Hell with Tundra. Basically, we got the raw end of the deal." With the success of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Eastman and Laird hired a core group of artists to help with the increasing workload, beginning with Eastman's high school friend Steve Lavigne, brought on in 1984 as a letterer. In 1985, Eastman and Laird hired Cleveland artist Ryan Brown to assist them as an inker, and a year later penciler Jim Lawson and cover painter Michael Dooney joined the studio. These 6 individuals would allow Mirage to expand into a number of spin-off and companion titles, starting with Tales of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, designed to fill in continuity gaps in the main title. Operating from a renovated factory space in Florence, Massachusetts, the Mirage team produced most of their work in-house, including the Playmates toy designs and the Archie TMNT comic series, until Tundra Publishing took over the building. Eastman and Laird, along with Brown, Dooney, Lavinia and Lawson, toured extensively over the years, making personal appearances and attending many comic book conventions. As the Turtles' popularity increased, further people were added to the studio, including Eric Talbot, who attended Eastman and Lavinia's old high school, writer Stephen Murphy, and Brown's friend, Dan Berger, who was brought in from Ohio to ink the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Adventures title from Archie Comics. Aside from Eastman, whose creative differences and other pursuits saw him leave and sell his interest to Laird and Mirage, these individuals have remained with Mirage to the present. Stephen Murphy stepped down from his position as the managing editor in the middle of 2007 in favor of Dan Berger. Murphy remained as the creative director. In '88, Mirage Studios participated in the drafting of the Creators' Bill of Rights for comic book creators. Kevin Eastman has been a long-time fan of the science fiction and fantasy magazine, much of whose content was translated from the French, and appeared in the original Italverland publication, of which Heavy Metal is only the American licensed incarnation. He cites the publication as bringing Richard Corben to his attention as the second greatest influence on him as an artist, after Jack Kirby. He saw in its pages European art which had not been previously seen in the United States, as well as an underground comics sensibility that nonetheless wasn't as harsh or extreme as some of the underground comics, but definitely intended for an older readership. Discovering Heavy Metal had been put up for sale, and with one of Tundra's stated aims, to bring a more adult sensibility and mature adult readers to comics, overlapping with the magazine's target audience, Eastman decided that Heavy Metal was the final piece of the puzzle, and looked into purchasing it. Noting that, "In my life, too many things have happened in the weird, sort of blank luck sort of fashion," Eastman purchased the magazine in January 1992. Despite the audiences for Heavy Metal and Tundra's intended product, as well as more mature themed comics in general, being of a broadly similar demographic, Eastman recognized from the start that most of the audience who read Heavy Metal buy it off the newsstands. They're not going into comic book stores, and stated early on that his intention was to produce numerous crossovers from the cutting edge of comics creators, to expose the magazine's readership not just to the comics industry, but anything from the visual media that can cross over. Eastman also attempted to bring some European hardcover comics to America, using Heavy Metal to help serialize them and both defray the costs and boost readership. Initial interest, however, was fairly cool. Eastman sold the magazine to digital and music veteran David Boxenbaum and film producer Jeff Krelitz in January 2014. Eastman will continue to serve as publisher of the magazine, and is a minority investor in the new Heavy Metal. In addition to his other interests, Laird founded the Xeric Foundation, a non-profit organization created after considerable thought, as an appropriate way to give back something extra to the comics world, by providing grants for self-publishers. While Eastman founded Tundra Publishing to embody the ideals of the Creators' Bill of Rights from a publisher's standpoint, Laird's vision involved funding rather than actively publishing individuals' work. His reasoning for this decision was in part simply due to him having far too much to do as it is with Mirage. He preferred to do something where it was more of a transfer of capital, with all the worries on other people's shoulders. The foundation itself, he explains, is actually two foundations in one. One half of it is for charitable organizations, and the other half is for creators who want to self-publish their comics. That later half is perhaps what the foundation is best known for, working much the same as any benevolent fund, involving an applicatory process detailing how much money is being applied for and why. Laird's experience with the Turtles and self-publishing was a learning process that he felt would be very valuable to other people to go through, as well, in teaching creators about themselves, about life, and about the hard reality of business. He cites the summits he, Eastman, Scott McCloud, Dave Sim and others had, which led directly to the formalizing of the creators' Bill of Rights, setting out in writing the necessary working arrangements that comics creators felt ought to be met regarding ownership of their work and proper remuneration, etc., and informing his decision to set up the foundation, but also notes that he received many requests for money, necessitating the creation of the Xeric Foundation's charitable end simply to deal with such requests in an organized fashion. Laird recalled that the publication of the first issue of his and Eastman's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles comic came about thanks to a loan the two secured from Quentin Eastman, Kevin Eastman's uncle. Although the two were able to pay him back swiftly, it led Laird to speculate about what could have been. If we hadn't gotten that loan from him at that point in our lives, it might have taken us a couple more months to raise that money from other sources, and who knows what might have happened differently as a result of that delay. It occurred to him that there must be so many times where a self-publishing venture can sink or float on the strength of a relatively small amount of money, so he felt a desire to use some of his good fortune, in the financial sense, to help people out, and, in addition to the creators, the foundation also aids those involved in charitable organizations. The naming of the foundation originated out of the Scrabble game with Laird's brother Don, Xeric, simply being a word he liked, ostensibly meaning dry and desert-like, but which ultimately has absolutely no direct connection with the foundation. The creative side of the foundation involves the usual application process, but in addition, the foundation began with an advisory committee made up of 3 people working in the industry, whose input is sought on how best to proceed with each application. Submissions are evaluated prior to Laird's involvement, and then he makes the ultimate decisions based on their recommendations. Laird stated in 1993 that, "Knock on wood, God willing, and the creek don't rise, if we go on for another couple of decades, and I'm able to put more money into the basic funding of the Xeric Foundation, then the amount of money that can be given out can really be raised significantly." He hoped that ultimately the figure can be raised from thousands of dollars to hundreds of thousands of dollars to support an increasing number of large and small projects. The Words and Pictures Museum of Fine Sequential Art was an art museum in Northampton, Massachusetts devoted to exhibitions of narrative art, cartoons, comic books, and graphic novels. Open to the public from 1992 through 1999, the museum's collection at one point numbered 20,000 original works from hundreds of artists including Simon Bisley, Von Budd, Robert Crumb, Richard Corbin, Frank Frazetta, Jaime Hernandez, Jack Kirby, George Pratt, Dave McKean, Frank Miller, John J. Booth, Bill Sienkiewicz, and Gilbert Shelton. The museum was founded in 1990 by artist Kevin Eastman, co-creator of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Initially located in Northampton's Roundhouse building, the museum opened its doors on October 9, 1992. In late 1994, the museum moved to the Beardsley building named for English illustrator Aubrey Beardsley into a state-of-the-art 4-floor facility in downtown Northampton, which it occupied until its closing. Despite receiving a large donation in the summer of '96, by mid-'97 it was reported that the museum was facing financial difficulties. The museum closed its doors for good on July 16, 1999. After the closure of the physical exhibition space, the museum's outreach program moved online in the form of the Virtual Words and Pictures Museum, and featured online educational exhibits and research directories. The Virtual Museum's website does not appear to have been updated since 2002. Cartoonist John Severin's artwork was exhibited 3 times at the Words and Pictures Museum in the grand opening group show on October 9, 1992 through January 5, 1993. The group exhibit War No More from May 18 through August 8 of '93, and the group show Classic Comics, a selection of stories from EC Comics, on December 7, 95 through February 11, 96. 1993 saw the exhibit War No More, featuring George Pratt, Bill Sienkiewicz, Jack Kirby, John Severin, and Frank Redondo. 1994 saw an exhibition devoted to the art of Jack Kirby, while 1995 featured a Frank Miller show also featuring the work of Bill Sienkiewicz and Klaus Janson. Oliphant, The New World Order was a 1996 exhibition. Other 96 exhibitions included one devoted to classic EC Comics pages and one to the artists of Image Comics. 1996 also saw a Shreddus exhibit, featuring the work of Dave Sim and Gerhard, followed by a show devoted to women in comics, featuring Mary Fleener, Marie Severin, Trina Robbins, Diane DeMassa, and others. 1997 had a show celebrating 20 years of Heavy Metal magazine. 1998 featured a show called The Best of Fantagraphics, curated in partnership with Fantagraphics frontman Gary Groth and featuring the work of Peter Bagg, Dan Klaus, Mary Fleener, and Los Bros Hernandez. 1999 saw a show devoted to work by contemporary African-American comics creators, including Rob Stoll, Hannibal King, Brian Stelfreeze,